Debate to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. I call Debbie Abrahams for the adjournment debate.
Thank you so much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, today marks the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, or disabled people, as we often refer to this group. Language is important, so I'm going to use both terms. Persons with disabilities is understood internationally, but disabled people is often a preferred term in the UK. This year's theme is amplifying the leadership of persons with disability for an inclusive and sustainable future, recognising the important role disabled people play themselves, have to play in creating a more inclusive and sustainable world. The refrain, "Nothing about me without me," emphasises the importance of disabled people not just passively participating in, but actively leading decision-making processes that affects their lives. And I applaud the government's commitment to this. Disabled people are not defined by their limitations, but their boundless potential, talents and aspirations. Across the globe, they are leading as innovators, creators, athletes, entrepreneurs, educators and advocates, inspiring us with their stories and showing us that a more inclusive world is not only possible, but essential. Yet despite progress, significant barriers remain, and the number of disabled people reaching their full potential is still far too low. Many disabled people, children and adults, still face discrimination, inaccessible environments and unequal access to education, employment, healthcare and worse. I will do.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I commend the Honourable Lady for Oldham East and Saddleworth? In this House, the Honourable Lady has been a champion. It's a word often used, but she has been a champion for disabled people, and I commend her. Does the Honourable Lady not agree that the greater work must be put into allowing those with disabilities to live, work and travel independently? And this must be with an enhanced public transport, such as the ability to get a lift onto a plane, a ramp onto a tube for wheelchair users, and that whilst this day rightly focuses on the tremendous impact of disabled people in our society, I think it also highlights the failures of the society that need to be rectified. Does the Honourable Lady agree?
My honourable friend won't be surprised to hear me say that I absolutely agree with him, and I will be coming on to some more of the issues that I think that we need to be challenging. So, for example, disability hate crime. Since 2010, it has nearly increased by nearly 7 times. 7 times. That's absolutely shocking. These challenges are not just obstacles for individuals, but they limit society. And as leaders, we need to demonstrate that we want an inclusive society where we all thrive, not just a minority. The social model of disability views disability as a result of societal barriers rather than a person's impairment or difference, whether of mind or body. So if we are truly serious about having an inclusive society, we need to address these barriers. And 30 years on from the Disability Discrimination Act, this is well overdue. This year's IDPD theme is particularly significant as it encourages the international community, including the UK, to look at how to remove barriers to enable disabled leaders to develop and thrive. I will do.
Thank you so much thank you for giving way. I would particularly highlight the good work of the Federation for the Blind, and they were actually on the estate today campaigning around floating bus stops. Would the honourable member agree with me that the government needs to ban floating bus stops?
My honourable friend makes a very important point. My honourable friend and member of the Select Committee, so I will certainly look at this in more detail. I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend the event myself, but I will certainly give that some consideration, and hopefully the government will as well. Over 16 million people in the UK have a disability. That's nearly 1 in 4 of us, with nearly half of all disabilities being acquired during a person's lifetime. In recognition of this, in 2009, the UK not only became a signatory of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD, which includes 40 articles ranging from education to work and employment to the right of life, but it also enshrined disability as a protected characteristic in the 2010 Equality Act. And we should be proud of this. This is something that we as a country have adopted. But it's now, how do we actually put this into practice? Because we have, unfortunately, gone backwards in many ways. So despite these important moves that the government at the time undertook, the austerity brought in by the new coalition government in 2010 and amplified by the new Conservative government in 2015 not only restricted financial and other state support for disabled people, adding further challenges to their lives, but it created a culture of fear, particularly for those reliant on social security support who are unable to work. All too often, disabled people who were treated as work shy, with a shirkus grandeur narrative perpetuated in policy and practice, and unfortunately also in our media.
The honourable member,
I will do.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate my honourable member for bringing this debate on International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Will my honourable friend agree with me that a lot of the disabilities that we come across are hidden disabilities, and therefore we need to be wary of that? Hidden disabilities such as autism, depression and other mental conditions which we do not see directly, but we need to be aware of, and also to deal with issues like unconscious bias that sometimes we come across. Thank you.
My honourable friend makes such an important point, Madam Deputy Speaker, and absolutely, and when I said about societal barriers in a social model of disability, we need to recognise these can also be hidden, so thank you for pointing that out. The reality is, firstly, most people, disabled or not, try and do the right thing. But as the Joseph Rowntree Foundation shows, if you're a disabled adult or a disabled child, your family is more likely to be living in poverty or destitution. Things became so bad that in 2016, the then Conservative government was investigated for having breached the UN CRPD. Following an investigation, the UK government were found guilty of systemic violations in 2017. As a UN committee spokesman declared, the committee can confirm that some violations were grave, some others were systematic, and some were both grave and systematic. In particular, the investigating committee found that the rights of disabled people to an adequate standard of living and social protection, to work and employment, and to independent living had been breached.
Would she give way?
Oh, well.
I thank the lady for giving way. I recently met with an organisation called Definitely Women, which supports deaf and hard of hearing women in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, and it became apparent to me that their voices are not being heard in the way that services are designed, and I just wonder if she might reflect on that as part of her speech.
Again, a very, very important point, and we have seen the decimation of services, social services, but also in the charity sector as well. So I think he's absolutely right to raise these important points. In particular, the investigating committee found that the rights of disabled people to an adequate standard of living and social protection, I think I've just mentioned it, so I'm going to move on. The committee found that the government had implemented a policy aimed at reforming its welfare system, and the reforms have been justified in the context of austerity measures to achieve consolidation of fiscal and budgetary policy. However, the impact assessments conducted by the government prior to the implementation of several measures of its welfare reform expressly foresaw an adverse impact on disabled people, and they were ignored. Evidence gathered nationally by many disabled people's organisations, charities, academics and many more showed the adverse and disproportionate effects of the welfare reform measures on persons with disabilities. The impacts of the health of disabled people was also documented in the 2021 report assessing the health effects of the 2016 Welfare Reform and Work Act. This should have been a wake-up call for the government of the day. But unfortunately, Madam Deputy Speaker, even after the tragic deaths of dozens, if not hundreds, of disabled social security claimants over the last 5 years, in March this year, the UN Committee published a follow-up report in which they said no significant progress has been made in the state party concerning the situation of persons with disability addressed in the inquiry proceedings. It stated that while some measures had been taken to address its recommendation, there were also signs of regression in the standards and principles of the Convention. Now, I know my Right Honourable friend, the Minister, will be aware that the committee has asked for a report by March 2029 to update it on the implementation of the recommendations, and I know he takes this very seriously. But we are seeing other areas of discrimination against disabled people, despite the introduction of the disability discrimination, as I say, 30 years ago. The ONS conducted qualitative research that examined the experience of people with disabilities had with activities, goods and services in the UK. They found barriers including physical access, restricted building layouts, the inaccessible online services, poor information, provision and flexible design of customer services that do not consider accessibility for a broad range of needs. Our train network does not have level access, and we heard Dame Tanny Gray-Thompson from the other place make this plea back in the summer. Absolutely outrageous, what she was put through. Yeah. But I was absolutely shocked to find when I had a presentation of the Transpennine route upgrade, that the rolling stock yet to be commissioned, Madam Deputy Speaker, is not going to provide that level access. What? It's absolute nonsense. It's not even in the design of that procurement. So we must do better than this, and I'm hoping, given that the new rolling stocks isn't going to be out until 2029, there will be some time for people to think again. It's just not good enough. Sorry, find my place. The difference we see in education outcomes is also shocking. According to the ONS, only a quarter of disabled people aged 21 to 64 had a degree or equivalent as their highest qualification, compared with nearly 43% of non-disabled people. In addition, disabled people are almost 3 times as likely to have no qualifications than non-disabled people. Disabled people are also less likely to have GCSE grades C and higher, in comparison with non-disabled people. We know that disabled people do not have the same experience of UK schools as their non-disabled counterpart, and that barriers exist for these children across the education system. I can remember I did some work on this in my own constituency, and it was quite shocking to see the disabled people and the disabled children, the difficulties that they faced. The cost of living crisis has hit disabled people harder than the wider population. Many disabled people have vital equipment that is expensive to run. Extra costs are estimated at over £975 a month on average. Now just imagine, if that additional cost was something that everybody had to face, we'd really feel the pinch. A survey carried out by Sense found that 85% of people with complex disabilities are worried about this rising cost of living. And we may also, if we're looking at employment, we also need to remember that the disability employment gap sits at nearly 30% and has done for many years now. According to the ONS, there are 2.2 million disabled people who want to work but need support to get into work. Disabled job seekers can face barriers when seeking employment, including from employers who believe it is too difficult, risky or expensive to hire someone with disabilities. All organisations need to understand the challenges faced by disabled job seekers. I will do.
Friends take intervention. Will she agree that it's unacceptable that only 7% of people with any disabilities in our country are in paid employment when so many more want to work? Will she agree that it's vital that as the government looks to get more people into work, we have equal opportunities, equal access to the workplace for disabled people?
I absolutely agree, and this is the point I'm trying to make. There's 30% gap between non-disabled and disabled people in work, and with so many over 2.2 million who want to work and are able to work. We must do better in relation to that, and I know my right honourable friend is absolutely committed to that. And on top of that, we also have the disability pay gap, nearly 14%, again an increase over the last week. This is just not good enough. So I was really reassured by the Secretary of State's statement on the Get Britain working paper last week, and the recognition of what we need to do and how we need to change around this. And I look forward to seeing how this evolves. I'm pleased that the government will be introducing a disability pay gap reporting, for example, which will help lead the way in addressing the lack of disabled people in senior roles. And when I was writing the speech, I remembered back to 2015 when I introduced a 10-minute rule book, which is specifically on this point, Madam Deputy Speaker. Again, let's try and get this going a little bit quicker. Shining a light on inequality in pay encourages organisations to critically examine their hiring, promotion and compensation processes. And again, we all know that from our own experience of how if you report something, you're more likely to change things when you find out they're not working correctly. However, I know my right honourable friend recognises that not all disabled people can work and that we need to provide appropriate, timely, adequate financial support for disabled claimants without a punitive, burdensome application and assessment process. So I look forward to the Green Paper on this in the spring, and I was very heartened by the Secretary of State's commitment to work with disabled people on this. And again, she used the phrase, nothing about me without me, and that should reassure people. At its core, this year's IDPD theme is all about leadership, and as a nation we are introducing legislation and policy to enable a new generation of leaders with lived experience of disabilities. But also, as a Parliament, we will need to continue to lead by example and ensure we make the right accommodations and adjustments for disabled colleagues. I am proud that 9 of my parliamentary colleagues have declared a disability here in this House. However, we have a long way to go to ensure this is proportionately represented in the population as a whole. Nearly 4 years on, Madam Deputy Speaker, from another adjournment debate I led, I want to close this evening's debate remembering those disabled people who lived in vulnerable circumstances and were let down by the then social security system. As I said earlier, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of families affected by the death of a vulnerable claimant. The book, The Department, authored by John Pring, describes some of these tragic deaths. But I've got to know the families of Errol Graham, Philippa Day and Jodie Whiting. Errol Graham was a grandfather. Was a grandfather with severe mental illness who starved to death alone in his flat months after having his benefits stopped. He weighed 5.5 stone when he was found. Philippa Day was a young mum who was found dead with a letter beside her from Capita contracted by the Department for Work and Pensions, refusing her a home assessment visit over her benefits. Jodie Whiting also had poor mental health and other complex needs. She took her own life a fortnight after the benefits were wrongly cut off in 2017. They were appallingly let down by the government of the day, who should have been there for them. Early this year, the Equality and Human Rights Commission finally launched an investigation into the potential discrimination at the Department for Work and Pensions by failing to protect claimants with learning disabilities or severe mental illness. I want to pay tribute to these families, the charities and organisations and the individuals who've constantly pushed on this and keep the pressure on the EHRC to act. As chair of the Work and Pensions Select Committee, I'm very pleased that we have reopened this inquiry into safeguarding of vulnerable claimants, which was paused due to the general election. Whilst the government has changed, and with it a change of attitude, the department's failure over the last 14 years must be fully examined to ensure no more vulnerable claimants die. I would urge members to reflect on the past treatment of disabled people and look ahead at creating a welfare system that, like our NHS, is there for all of us in our time of need. Thank you.
I call the Minister, Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I also want to congratulate my honourable friend on securing this timely debate, continuing her long-standing record, as the honourable member for Strangford said in his intervention, as a champion for disabled people in Parliament, and I'm looking forward to engaging with her regularly as Chair of the Select Committee, including on that safeguarding work that she's just rightly highlighted. And I agree with her, my department needs to drive disability inclusion across the whole of government to remove barriers, to deliver access and inclusion to disabled people across all areas of everyday life. I will give way to my honourable friend.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for giving way. On Saturday, I was really fortunate to meet 9-year-old Alfred. Alfred has cerebral palsy, and his parents fight endlessly to get him the support he needs and he's entitled to. He is determined to walk one day and very recently took his first steps, and people can follow his progress on his Team Alfred Facebook page. So would the Minister meet with me and Alfred and his parents to hear of their struggles and how the system needs to change to make things fair for Alfred and others like him?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I'm pleased that she's met her constituent, and of course I'll be glad to meet her and her constituent and his parents. But let me just set out some of the things, the steps that we are taking towards this goal. First of all, we are working hard to provide better support for disabled people who want to work to go into employment. And my honourable friend rightly referred to the Get Britain Working White Paper published last week, through which we are determined to tackle that stubbornly large disability employment gap that my honourable friend referred to in his intervention. We're going to overhaul job centres. We want work, health and skills plans for every area, bringing together job centres, colleges, the NHS, local charities, others in each area to equip disabled people for the opportunities in that area. And we're going to be setting up a disability employment panel so that we can consult properly with disabled people and their organisations as we firm up our plans for better employment support. As she said, nothing about us without us. The White Paper also announced an independent review headed by Sir Charlie Mayfield, who used to run John Lewis, on how government and businesses can provide better support at work for people with disabilities and health impairments. We fully recognise, I can confirm to my honourable friend, that some people through ill health or disability will not be working, and we will ensure they have the support that they need, recognising the extra costs that she's highlighted. I'll gladly give way.
Extremely grateful to the Minister for giving way. I congratulate my honourable friend for bringing this very important debate. Keith, who's a constituent of mine, is a member of My Life, My Choice, a self-advocacy group in Oxfordshire, whose job it is to bring the voices of disabled people to MPs and into Parliament as to be part of this debate. He wanted me to advocate on his behalf for high-quality adult social care, because for him, that allowed him to make play the fullest part he could in our community. The Minister would be very welcome to come to Oxfordshire and meet with them. It would mean the world to them. But what would he have to say to Keith about adult social care?
Well, I think the honourable member's constituent raises a very important point. Indeed, I was pressed on this point earlier today by Peter White in an interview that's going to be broadcast tonight. And of course, our ambition is for a national care service. That's what we're working for, a long-term plan alongside our long-term plan for the NHS. And I think the honourable member's constituent is absolutely right to press us to deliver on that goal. But we fully recognise that we need to adequately support people through the benefit system. But we do know that many of those who are out of work through ill health or disability would, as my honourable friend said, love to be in a job. They face at the moment insuperable barriers which prevent them, including, at times, I'm afraid, the benefit system. And it's tough to bring up a family on universal credit. If you can persuade my department that you're too sick to work, let me just finish this point. If you can persuade my department you're too sick to work, you'll receive some extra cash, but then no help at all to return to work. The system should not work in that way, and that's what we're determined to change. I'll gladly give way to the honourable gentleman.
Thank you, Minister. And you talk to barriers, and I think one significant barrier that people with disabilities face is discrimination. Minister, I'm concerned that some people who have protected characteristics have the full force of the law when they're discriminated against, but people with disabilities don't necessarily have that full force of the law and have to go through the civil court system. Do you believe that this is right?
Well,
Apologies.
I'm glad to be able to tell the honourable gentleman, who I think raises a very important point, that in the Equality, Race and Disability Bill, which my honourable friend referred to in her speech, we'll deliver our manifesto commitment for disability pay gap reporting for large employers, and we will also place the full right to equal pay for disabled people explicitly on the statute book. And I think that will be a very important step forward, and exactly the concern that he's raised. It's kind of implicit in the Equality Act already. We're going to put it explicitly on the statute book. Earlier today, I visited Google's impressive Accessibility Discovery Centre at King's Cross to look at some of the latest advances in assistive tech. And in our forthcoming Green Paper, I want us to look there at what more we can do to support access to assistive technology, which increasingly is able to support disabled people in work. Our manifesto committed us to championing the rights of disabled people, working with them. I've started to meet regularly with a range of disability groups, including the Disabled People's Organisations Forum England, made up of members from over 40 organisations led by disabled people, the Disability Charities Consortium, which has got 9 of the biggest national disability charities, our regional stakeholder network, made up of 9 networks across the country of members of the public willing to use their lived experience to improve the lives of other disabled people in their areas. And I also meet the government's disability and access ambassadors, who are senior business leaders encouraging improvements to accessibility and quality of services for disabled people across 20 different sectors, from advertising to universities. We're supporting the British Sign Language Advisory Board, set up in the aftermath of Rosie Cooper's British Sign Language Act 2022. We're shortly going to be publishing the 2023-24 annual British Sign Language report. I think that's the second of those since the Act was passed, describing what departments are doing to promote and facilitate the use of British Sign Language in their public communications. Earlier this year, the Equality Hub in the Cabinet Office was replaced with the Office for Equality and Opportunity to deliver our commitment to breaking down barriers, boosting opportunity, putting equality at the heart of all of the government's missions. And I want to work with other departments across government so that disabled people get the support they need to overcome the daily barriers they face. And I do think this issue about floating bus stops is an important issue which we need to work across government to reflect on. So I'm very pleased to be able to announce today the appointment of new lead ministers for disability in each government department. They will represent the interests of disabled people, champion disability inclusion and accessibility within their departments. I'm going to chair regular meetings with them and will encourage them to engage directly with disabled people and their representative organisations as they take forward their departmental priorities. And I look forward to this new group of lead ministers for disability together driving real improvements across government for disabled people. My focus as Minister for Social Security and Disability is primarily on domestic disability policy, but I do just want to make the point that I am responsible as well for UK implementation of the UN Convention, which my honourable friend referred to, for example, in the case of Bermuda, where the convention was extended to a few weeks ago, underlining this government's commitment to protecting and promoting disabled people's rights across the UK and around the world. A great privilege of my job was to attend the Paralympic Games in Paris in August, which was a fantastic event. And earlier today, I attended the launch of the strategy of the Activity Alliance, which brings together the disability sports organisations around the country, highlighting in their new strategy the benefits for society of disabled people being able to be more physically active. And one of the things they want to talk to me about is removing, again, those barriers in the benefit system which sometimes make that extremely difficult. So I do very much congratulate my honourable friend for bringing forward this debate. I look forward to working with her. I'm delighted that we've had a good attendance in the House taking part this evening. Look forward to working with her and other members to make sure that disabled people have the power, the rights and the opportunities that everyone else does as well.
Marvellous. The question is that this House do now adjourn. If many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.